Hey gang, it's your buddy Platt. Today I think I have a fun little video for you. The topic is best whiskeys for mixers. Now when I'm talking about whiskeys, I'm talking about whiskey styles, not necessarily specific brands, even though we will talk about some specific brands here. Recently I've seen several videos on YouTube about the topic of, which whiskeys, generally in the context of which whiskeys to add to Coke. I believe the Whiskey Fault's done a video or two on this. I think SLB Drinks. Several videos out there, but most of the time, like I said, it's in the context of Coke. Well, today I want to take a little broader approach. I want to talk about mixers in general, and then not necessarily specific brands, but styles of whiskey, because I think that's more useful when mixing is understanding the styles. I'm kind of taking this more as a bartender approach to it instead of a kind of a whiskey snob. So I definitely want feedback from you guys on this one. I think we can have some real cool discussions on that. Real quick, let me go over the mixer categories. First and foremost, we have Coke here, the classic cola. You could substitute Pepsi, Royal Crown Cola, your store, brand, Sam's Club, Waterbury type cola. Tons of high fructose corn syrup, a little caramel flavoring in there. The classic American drink, Coca-Cola. Next, we have 7-Up. In the same vein, but a lemon lime soda. These are generally clear, tend to be a little softer, a little less viscous, a little lighter on the palate, but still similar in how you'd approach mixing with those. Third, we have ginger ale, which was kind of a classic mixer probably before the colas got real popular. Again, there's probably going to be a ton of sweetness in here, a little viscosity from that sweetness, but the ginger, especially depending on which brand, can be quite prominent, so when mixing you have to deal with it a little different. Next here I have basically some lemonade. You could throw it in the lemonade / sour mix. Of course, I'm kind of talking about the classic whiskey sour. So I thought I'd utilize that. And then lastly, we have tonic. To be honest, I probably should chose soda water, but I was thinking tonics, sodas, and then just regular waters. Those are other popular mixtures. To be honest, probably more rum and tonics than whiskey and tonics, but in that vein of not necessarily flavored syrupy drinks, even though there is, a decent bit of sugar in tonic. As far as what I left out, I don't think of juices and whiskeys. I'm sure there's some humans doing that, but in my time of bartending, I haven't served a lot of rye whiskey and grapefruit juice or bourbon and OJ or anything like that. I don't dare go on that energy drink realm. I'm not a booze snob, especially if you watch this channel. I'm not. But if I'm your neighborhood friendly bartender, I'm kind of coaching you. Don't. That's what vodka's for. You want to put something in your energy drink, that's what vodka's for. So I kind of left those other mixers out. So let's kind of get to the brass tacks, the heart of this, and talk about the different styles of whiskey. And these are the 5 styles that I think work best. First, we have Jack Daniels. Of course, naturally, everybody thinks of Jack Daniels and Coke. And, again, kind of the heart of the conversation, is the, classic Jack and Coke. Jack Daniels is a Tennessee whiskey, but the mash bill and the base of it is basically a bourbon. Jack Daniels tends to use a little more corn than a traditional bourbon, so you get a little more sweetness. What makes Jack different than, let's say, a traditional bourbon is it goes through another process called the Lincoln County process. It's a charcoal filtration, smooths out what they claim is an already bold whiskey, but helps smooth it out a little bit. So it does have a slightly different flavor profile than our next whiskey style here, which we have Jim Beam, which is a classic American bourbon. It does not go through that filtration. It tends to have a bolder flavor. Jim Beam also, too, is a higher rye bourbon, so you're going to get more of that spice, a peppery type spice. When I say pepper, I'm talking about more of a ground pepper than a jalapeno pepper type spice. But because of that, you're going to have a slightly different flavor profile, and I think it should be utilized in a different way, but definitely works with mixers. Next is, to me, one of the classic mixer whiskeys, and that is Seagram 7 American Blended Whiskey. A lot of the whiskey snobs out there might be shaking their fists right now like, oh, that's right, got terrible stuff. And it is no Michter's 18 or Pappy 23 or anything like that. And I'm not saying that. But because it's blended, and also because, too, it's one of the cheaper ones, then I think you should feel free to mix more, and I think it just lends itself. Now, for those of you that might not know a lot about blended whiskeys, especially Seagram 7, this right here is probably 75% vodka. Actually, the term they use is grain-neutral spirit. But it's blended with about 25% actual whiskeys, and then a little caramel coloring added. Now, again, that actually makes it good for mixing in a way, because I've talked about on this channel before, vodkas, because they're kind of neutral flavor profile, lends itself to be mixed with so many different things. And because this is, in a sense, predominantly vodka, I think it just lends itself to be mixed so much easier. Again, it comes at a lower price point, so you kind of don't mind mixing. You don't want to pay, you know, $40 for a shot of, like, say, a Blanton's to throw in with a Coke. I mean, you got the money, great, but you tend not to, and that's why I think Seagram 7 just lends itself to being mixed. Next is another variation of blended whiskey, and we have Crown Royal Canadian whiskey. Canadian whiskeys themselves are blended. I want to say they claim up to 50 different whiskeys in the blend. Canadian whiskeys do allow other things to be blended in. I think up to 9%. I think they even allow wine to be blended in, if I read it right. But they allow other things to be blended in. One thing with Canadian whiskey, too, that's kind of a misnomer is people sometimes refer to it as rye. It's not rye in the sense that we use it here in the U.S. Here in the U.S., anything that says rye on it has to be at least 51% rye. In Canada, I believe that percentage is more like anywhere between 5 and 15%. So there may be a little rye in there, and that might contribute a little to the flavor, but it's not rye. But it's blended too, and again, they tend to be more open to blend with other things. It's a smoother, it's a little softer whiskey. The last whiskey style we're going to talk about, I have Dewar's White Label here, which is a blended Scotch whiskey. Now, all three of these are blend, but the Scotch blends tend to be a little stricter and a little closer to the quote-unquote real thing, a Scotch whiskey. It is a blend of single malt whiskeys, along with what they call grain whiskeys, or even grain neutral spirit, but the other whiskeys, the other grain spirit that gets blended in there, it has to be aged at least 3 years. So at least we're getting age on that blending part instead of just basically glorified vodka being blended in. So at least it's been aged a little bit. Also, too, in a lot of these blends, even, again, a Dewar's White Label, a Johnny Red, Cutty Sark, whatever, you might have a little bit of a Macallan in there, of Lafroy, of an Ardbeg, or whatever. They blend a lot of whiskeys. I think there's 40 whiskeys in this blend. And so you're going to get a little more on that flavor profile. And so even though it's a blended whiskey, I think, again, you have to treat that different. Now, as far as other whiskeys go, I really wouldn't use other whiskeys for mixers. Let's think about like Japanese whiskeys. They tend to be soft, and I think a ginger ale, is a good example, would totally overpower it. Things like a rye whiskey, you create a rye whiskey because you like the rye, you like the spice, you like the bite. That's going to get lost in the mixers. Also, I would not use, single malt scotches, especially something like Lafroy and Ardbeg, Lagavulin, those peaty, smoky scotches. Kind of pointless to go with, lemonade, in a smoky scotch. Also, a lot of these tend to be higher priced. Single malt scotches aren't cheap anymore. Japanese whiskeys aren't cheap anymore. And again, to spend that kind of money on a nice dram, and then to add, again, it's up to you, but I would not advise it. And lastly, your barrel strength, barrel proof products. Most of the time when you're adding these mixers, it's because you don't drink whiskey on the rocks or drink whiskey neat. You want it to be tamed down. So again, no need to go with the barrel strengths, no need to go with a Booker's or, a Knob Creek barrel strength or anything like that, Baker's, Blanton's, what have you. No need to go with that, you know, especially if you want to water them down. Save your money for that. So these are the 5 styles I've picked, and these are mixers I talked about. Lastly, I want to kind of give you how I would match these. I would love your feedback on that. I would love to hear anybody's, you know, somebody says, no, you need to add Japanese whiskeys. Oh, how'd you forget, you know, wheated whiskeys or blah, 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 blah. Please leave me in the comments. Would love to hear feedback. I really hope to generate some comments out of this. But here's how I would pair my 5 mixers and my 5 whiskeys. First off, I would probably take my Doers, and out of these, I'd probably just add tonic. Really, I'd probably go with water or just soda. I don't even know if I want the sweetness, but I definitely don't want any other prominent flavor in there, and the tonic probably matches best with the Doers. Next, for my Crown, this probably surprised people, but I'm going to go Crown and Coke. A, I drank a ton of it in college. But B, you know, again, I've talked about how Crown is a blend. It just lends itself to be mixed more. But I think it does have enough backbone and enough good whiskeys in there that I think it just really pairs well with Coke. Next, with the Seagram 7, I know this is obvious, but this is a drink that back in my poker playing days, wherever, was my weapon of choice. Just 7-7. Classic drink. It's, you know, 7-Up, you know, I said it's not quite as bold, flavor profile, so I want a whiskey that's a little lighter. 7's a little lighter than Crown. 7-Up's lighter than Coke. I just think these two work together. Next, with my Jim Beam, I'm going to have to go with the lemonade or / sour. I think Jim Beam, especially with that little rye bite, works well in a classic whiskey sour. And finally, Jack and Ginger. You know, it's a classic drink. I know some people right now are probably yelling about Jameson and Ginger. Maybe should have thrown that in there, but I don't. I remember drinking Jameson and Coke and other things. I just didn't think it worked with others. But Irish whiskey, maybe one I should have thought about. But I think Jack and Ginger, again, ginger is pretty pronounced flavor, and you need something that sticks out. And Jack has a bold enough flavor, I think, that to contrast with the ginger that works. So, you know, these are my choices. Would love to hear your feedback. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, again, love feedback on this topic, please leave it in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Well, I guess I've got some drinking to do. So until next time, bottoms up.